Hello, I'm Katie Trial.
Hi, I'm Shamara Williiams.
Hey, I'm Madelyn Rusinyak. We are going to analyze the film Rear Window. The film is directed by Alfred Hitchcock and was released in 1954. So the plot of the film basically revolves around L.B. Jeffries. He's a photographer and he has broken his leg. So he's confined to only his bedroom. The film shows the lives of several different people as Jeffries watches them through their windows.
So the first theme that we're going to discuss that's present throughout the film is the idea of voyeurism and that in conjunction with visibility. And so to start off with that, voyeurism is defined kind of as like the practice of taking pleasure in observing something that's private, sordid, or like even scandalous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite obvious how Jeffries exhibits this as he sits, day in and day out, watching out of his window and observing all of the different lives of his neighbors. And, because of his broken leg, he's limited in his mobility and range of motion. And so he chooses to sit by the window, even though his nurse from his insurance company, Stella, like she continues to remind him, hey, it's he'd feel better if he like laid down in his bed rather than sitting up all night. But he chooses to sit up because he's getting some sort of, I guess, pleasure per se out of like watching the lives of his neighbors. And so the idea of voyeurism is also kind of reflected in his career being a photographer. Um, Photographers like choose to take pictures, and one type of pictures would be portraits and personal shots. There's always such an emphasis on getting like off guard pictures, where the person being pictured isn't necessarily like posing and is focused on how they're being captured. And so that sort of idea is twisted into the sort of voyeuristic aspect that Jeffries has. And along with that, there's the idea of visibility and how Jeffries chooses, well, him and other characters choose to be seen. And that's usually shown through the idea of opening and closing their windows, or like, closing and raising the blinds and things of that nature. And also, it's shown through where um, characters choose to like sit in their apartment. So, for example, in some of the times that Jeffries is watching Thorwald in his apartment, he chooses to sit in there with all the lights off. And so you can only see the little light that comes from his cigar. And so that's one of those juxtapositions, like you see that little light knowing he's there, but like you don't know exactly what he's doing, or if he's watching back. And so that kind of blurs that sort of idea of visibility and what you're allowed to see.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, it's just interesting because he is a photographer. He is, watching people through his lens. Like that's his job. Is what he's supposed to do. But then also just thinking about the visibility of it and what you can't, like when you're taking a picture of something, you can only put so many things in your frame, which is kind of the same way like the director Alfred Hitchcock does. Like he has only so many options of putting like the frame of those apartment windows. And so it's kind of interesting too what he decides to like what you see in each room. Like some rooms, like the piano man's room, you just see the piano in his living room, where like Miss Lonely Hearts, you can see her kitchen and when she's eating food. So like what exactly you do choose to put in that frame, and how you can use even like a lack of visibility to create like curiosity. Like we can't see in front of the condo or apartment building, or we can't see that little space that's in Mr. Thorwald's apartment. So it's like kind of like, I guess that kind of sets the mise en scene or whatever of it, to kind of create the story.
So one thing I noticed whenever I was watching it, it's like his job is to be like a photographer. So like he is in like such an awesome position because he was like, obviously he didn't ask to get his leg broken. So like he was just, you know, kind of stumbled upon this story just by like sitting here. So it's like he's also at an advantage because of that, but then a disadvantage because, like you said, they choose what he can actually see. So unlike Lisa, like he's not able to get up and like go search the other person's apartment. He's only able to see what the people allow him to see through their windows.
Mm-hmm.
But then also just like, I guess, it's so interesting how he decides what you decide to include and what you don't include. And then also just thinking about how, I don't know, like if this was in modern times and like we all had our windows open, like that would be completely different.
It would be super weird, and I would not like that.
Yeah. Thinking about the time that it happened in, but also just I think Dr. Insegna asked the question of what was it? Would he have been interested in saving Mrs. Thorwald's life if it wasn't for his boredom? Like, is he doing it out of a good thing watching these people, or is it like a bad thing that he's like being a peeping Tom?
Yeah, like if he hadn't had his leg broken, he probably would have never like solved this mystery.
Yeah.
But he also wouldn't have been choked out and like thrown off the balcony if his leg wasn't broken, because he probably would have been able to defend himself. So
it's definitely an interesting concept to think about what is visible and not visible in the film. But that can also bring us to the next theme. Madelyn, do you want to start talking about that?
Yeah. So Hitchcock depicts marriage in like 3 different ways, I think. So like at the beginning of the movie, Jeff is like dead set that he does not want to get married, and he has like a girlfriend, Lisa, but he thinks that she's too perfect, so he doesn't want to marry her, which doesn't, you know, really make sense. And he spends a lot of his time watching people, and there is one kind of person on like this spectrum, Miss Torso, like the beautiful woman who dances around her apartment all the time. And then there's like another depiction of marriage through like the newlyweds. It's a man and a woman. They're like on their honeymoon in their new apartment, and their shades are normally drawn. So it's like they're like keeping to themselves. They're probably very happy. And then there's Miss Lonely Heart, who is like a lonely middle-aged woman who will like never find love, whatever. And so one thing I found really interesting was whenever Tom Doyle, the detective, came over, he was obviously checking out Miss Torso, and Jeff notices him gawking at her and is like, "Oh, how's your wife?" So he's kind of saying, even if you're married or you have like this beautiful girl in front of you, like Jeff does, he has Lisa right in front of him, like Jeff still chooses to sit there and like watch Miss Torso dance all the time, and obviously like thinks about her or whatever. So she can be seen as like a temptation, or as like married people are never like actually happy, and they always are like looking for something better, looking for someone like more attractive, whatever. And then there's also the fact that Jeffrey says that Lisa's too perfect for him, and she makes more money than he does, and it probably makes him feel very emasculated. And Lisa would probably have to take care of him in that sense too, like in money wise, just like she's having to take care of him physically throughout this entire movie. And then he also says, if you don't pull me out of this swamp of boredom, I'm going to do something drastic, like get married, as if that's such like a crazy thing. And then he's like, yeah, then I'll never be able to go anywhere. It's like Jeff has this own perceived view of marriage, that it's like some kind of trap. And I feel like him hearing Tom Doyle talk about how, or like watching this torso, he's thinking like getting in a marriage, like you'll never be happy with just one person kind of thing.
Right. And it's just like, I think that what you were referring to is he was talking at the beginning of the movie. His editor calls him and he's like, "You're getting your cast off today." And while they're both talking about this marriage thing, the film pans over each set of different kinds of marriages. Like you have the piano man who he is the lonesome bitter. He's not the bitter old man, but he's a lonesome old man. And then you have the nagging that Mrs. Thorwald's doing to Mr. Thorwald. And then also when they show the newlywed couple, I think multiple times in the film, you can hear the newlywed wife, like while the husband's like leaning out the window, she'll go, "Harry," like nagging him to come back. So he, like, just to piggyback off of what you said, it kind of does seem like at the beginning of the movie, it's an entrapment. Marriage is an entrapment. But like, do y'all think that changes at the end of the movie, or does he still feel that way?
Well, I would like to say that it changes, because at the end, whenever they're like reunited after like he broke his other leg, and then he says something like, "Oh, I don't know what I would have done if something happened to you," and he like looks content with her in his apartment, where before he was like, "You just keep barging in, like blah blah blah," like seemed so annoyed about it. So he seemed like happy she was there, and he was like happy she was alive, but then she also still didn't have a ring on her finger. Mm-hmm. So it's like maybe his perception of her changed a little bit, but maybe not overall of like marriage. Like he probably still doesn't want to marry her, but he probably likes her a lot more.
And I just wanted to add that, like, I think throughout the film, from watching all these separate couples, it's like as he's observing how they live their life and what like defines their relationships, he's like taking little bits and pieces here and there, and they're like kind of implanting a new idea of marriage for him, because by the end I feel like especially watching like Thorwald and the progression of him and his wife, his idea of like what the man like should be or what he should have done, like, oh, he shouldn't have done that, what could have led him to murder his wife, and the investment that he pours into these different people, like it's helping him like redefine that image of marriage and like I guess open up like what could be about marriage. So I feel like by the end he's more open to the idea of it. Now is he going to actually follow through and marry Lisa? We don't get to know that much, but I feel like he's definitely more so open to the idea of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like it kind of like goes over like, not that every man like doesn't want to get married, but it's like going into like adulthood, like you want this adventurous life and not to have any boundaries. But then at a certain point, you do kind of transition into that like stage where you know, he was window shopping, like when he was looking at the newlywed couple, and just seeing, I guess, the positive side of it.
Right.
But I guess another thing is at the end of that phone conversation with his editor, he was talking about, yeah, can't you just see me rushing home to the hot apartment to listen to the automatic laundry and the electric dishwasher and the nagging wife? And then Jeff says wives don't nag anymore, they discuss. And or I think that, or that's what his editor says. But then Jeff's like, in the high rent district they discuss, in my neighborhood they still nag. So another thing we could think about in the depiction of marriage is how class might affect marriage. Like, do y'all think it might be different in like a high end place if he was watching like through high end windows, or do you think it'd be the same?
I mean, probably would be different in high end because he thinks that like all wives do is like hold you back and like make you clean stuff and like nag and for them to like do chores around the house. But I mean, in a higher up household, they probably have other people to do that for them. They have enough money to go on adventures together and things like that.
Yeah. And it's good that you like mentioned that, because not to get too far away from the idea of marriage, I had noted that at one point when Jeffries is talking with Lisa and everything, he's trying to explain to her how, like, you know, there's no way that like they could like work out and be married, they're too different and stuff like that. Lisa makes a quote that like there can't be that much of a difference between people and the way they live. We all eat, talk, drink, and laugh and wear clothes. But it's very like visible of that difference between her and Jeffries. For example, like the food that she makes for him, that in that one scene where she cooked for him, like she brings him out lobster and he just kind of sighs and he's like, it's perfect. And like it's obvious, yeah, isn't obviously like not his speed. And like later in the movie he has like a sandwich that I can't remember who made it for him. I believe it was Stella.
Like it was his like nurse.
Yeah, Stella brought him a sandwich and he was so excited about that because it's that like kind of difference in like the idea of food and where it falls with who uses it. And so I feel like that definitely plays a big part in marriage, because a lot of people like seek to be with people who understand them and can relate to them. And I feel like definitely the level of like where you are, like I guess socioeconomically, plays a big factor into that.
And that can kind of transition us into our next topic, is just how the film Rear Window depicts different stereotypes of women and the different characters that you have. Like you have Miss Torso, she's the young, sexy temptress. You have Miss Lonely Hearts, she's the crazy old woman. You have the nagging wife, again, that I brought up with Miss Thorwald, and even the newlywed when she's like, Harry. And you have not the wife, but the what I saw in Lisa is the obedient person and follows everything that their future husband would say. So like, I think that was one thing that Jeff argued against not getting married. He's like, I need somebody who will follow everything I say, will go on all my adventures, you know, and that's what Lisa ends up proving to him in the end of the film. So I guess the question, do we think that the stereotypes of women are negative or positive? And like thinking about the time frame, we had the women's rights movements in the 60s and 70s, and this film was released in 54. So do we think that Alfred Hitchcock is trying to make it more of a gender equality kind of thing by the end of the film? Or do you think that they're just keeping the status quo, that women need to be obedient, women need to be taken care of, like Mr. Thorwald was taking care of Miss Thorwald? What do y'all think about that?
I think, like, whenever you were talking about all the different types of women that were portrayed in this, there's not really a woman who's like fully herself and is like the fun, cool wife. Like, you know, it's always just somebody who is either nagging or like following a man around. Like Lisa at the beginning of the movie was like, why are you being a peeping Tom? That's so weird. And then by the end of it, she was all in on it, only because she knew that that would impress Jeff. So like, I feel like it's a little bit negative because there's not really, like, everybody in here is either looking for a husband or nagging or following one around.
And to piggyback from there, I feel like There are some kind of progressive moves from the traditional like woman's role, how we see Stella and Lisa take it upon themselves to, go around digging the dirt and like take on what they can do for, the investigation that Jeffries has of Thorwald. But one thing that I found interesting was the idea of intuition and facts throughout it, and how most of the time women are kind of disregarded for like their thoughts and things. So for example, near the beginning, Stella is talking about how she really has like a nose for trouble, she says, and she can smell it when things like aren't going to end well and all that. And Jeffrey, like, Jeffries is just like, there's no like correlation with those sort of things. Like you can't like deduce that. And like later when Lisa brings up how Mrs. Thorwald, there's no way she'd leave her jewelry and all that to go on a trip, and Doyle just disregards her completely. Like the women, as they like try and like step up and offer like their thoughts and opinions about things, they're like shot down just by that. So I think like that idea like is really kind of stifling still for the women.
It was a little bit positive that I guess that Lisa was right, though, about like the jewelry and like how the detective was trying to like discredit her opinion and, was really rude about it and sexist, and then she turned out to be right. So,
yeah.
And another thing I just wanted to bring up is like Lisa is one of the main characters that we kind of see, transition over time. At the end of the movie, she is wearing like one of the articles that we read. She's wearing masculine clothes. She's wearing blue jeans pants, and a t-shirt. She's reading in this adventure book. But then she sees that Jeffries is asleep, and she takes out her Harper's Bazaar magazine. So it's like you could kind of say like, oh well, they're trying to show that women can be more independent, that they can. But personally, I think that they're still playing into this role that women, need to be dependent on their husbands. Yeah. Like Miss Thorwald wasn't being dependent. She was not listening to what her husband said, and she ended up dead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just I think I'm more on the negative side, and kind of how marriage is depicted in this film, and how the woman's role in marriage is kind of still staying stuck in be obedient, and you need your husband to take care of you.
And don't nag.
But then, I don't know. We're running out of time here. If anybody else wants to add anything before we go about representation of women in the film.
I'm good.
I feel like I've covered my thoughts on it.
But overall, I really enjoyed this. I think it's an amazing movie, especially to watch. Like when we're in quarantine, like we're all stuck, like looking out of our window. So this is a perfect film, and I mean, I think it was brilliant. Like I loved it. But we are running out of time, so all right. Thanks for listening to our podcast, guys.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.